We know that every company that has their doors open for business has a duty for safety to provide a safe workplace. Now, in order to accomplish that, there is a 3-step universal formula that will never fail if we follow it. So the first is recognizing hazards and knowing what a hazard is and knowing where it applies in your workplace. Then if you have hazards, understanding the controls, which means we also know the hierarchy of controls to either fix or control the hazard, and the third is act in time. So if you use different methods to identify hazards in your workplace, then you'll know what those are. But where we really have to put our attention in our application is, what do we do about them? How do we control them? So obviously the best thing we can do is eliminate the hazard. If you can get rid of it, the very best thing. If you can't get rid of it, can you substitute something else that would be less hazardous that would also improve the situation? If we can't do those things, then we follow what are called the hierarchy of controls. So the first is engineering controls. Engineering controls do not require human factor to take away the problem. So if we have machines that could lop off body parts, if we put safeguarding in place, that's an engineering control. If we have people getting back strains from lifting things and you can use a hoist or a device that would raise the workstation so they don't have to bend over, or something else that would lift them for them, that's an engineering control. If we have folks getting needle sticks and if we can use self-sheathing or retractable needles, then that would keep them from getting needle sticks. Those are called engineered sharps, and those are engineering controls. If we can't eliminate the hazard or control the hazard through engineering, then we need to look at the procedures and the administrative controls. Now, procedures should include safe work practices. Good example of that is in lockout tagout, in terms of ensuring that you will put practices in place, safe work practice in place, following a set of procedures to de-energize before you do any service or maintenance. That would eliminate the hazard when you're doing that. However, since those are procedures, they require the human factor to follow through and do them. Hand washing is an excellent safe work practice to eliminate again or minimize any type of infectious disease. So those are safe practices we should be using. When it comes to ergonomic hazards that could strain the back, if we follow the safe work practice of keeping the load close to the body and making sure that we turn with our feet rather than twist at the waist, those are good safe work practices again. Admin controls, administrative controls, are really issues where you cannot get rid of the hazard, so you're going to control it, either by barricading it or limiting exposure or limiting access by putting it behind locked doors. Then those are ways that you would minimize contact to the hazard, which is much better than just having it out there in the open where anybody could get to it. If you have used all of those controls and you still have a hazard left, the only other option is personal protective equipment. Understanding that this is the least desirable because of the human factor. Somebody has to use it and use it correctly every single time to be the last barrier and protector between the person and the hazard. Now, this is what we call the hierarchy of controls, meaning if you want the safest workplace possible, this is the order that you implement controls. Never ever confuse hierarchy with importance. Every single control is important when it's needed. In fact, if you're down to PPE, it is extremely important that it's used and used every single time. So if you want the safest workplace possible, then you know that it starts by recognizing the hazards, implementing the hierarchy of controls, and knowing how to act in time. And that's the first step at creating a safe workplace.